Good morning and welcome to the Chamber of Commerce, South Jersey's final Wells Fargo Good Morning South Jersey event of 2020. My name is Christina Renna and I am President and CEO of the Chamber. Thank you to all that have logged on to join us today online. Today we are thrilled to welcome Valerie Camillo, President, Business Operations for the Philadelphia Flyers and the Wells Fargo Center as our guest speaker. We'll be hearing from Valerie momentarily, but I did want to say thank you in advance for her taking time out of her busy schedule to join us on this Monday morning. Before we begin, please allow me to thank the exclusive sponsor of the Chamber's Good Morning South Jersey series, Wells Fargo. I would like to give a very special thank you to our very good friend, John Zimmerman, Regional Bank President, and of course, the entire Wells Fargo team for their loyal support for the series for over 20 years. It is the support of generous companies like Wells that have allowed the Chamber to continue to provide valuable, timely, and interesting virtual events to our members over the course of a very unique year for sure. So thank you very much to John and the Wells team. A few housekeeping items before we begin. In a moment, I will formally introduce our speaker, Valerie Camillo, after which we will jump into a conversation about her role with the Flyers, the Wells Fargo Center, including her thoughts on how the pandemic has and will continue to impact professional hockey, as well as the $300 million transformation of the Wells Fargo Center, where the Flyers play, the Sixers, of course, the Wings as well. So she is overseeing that, and we're going to be learning a little bit more about that momentarily. Throughout the duration of the program, the chat function at the bottom of your screen will be open. It's actually open right now. As our conversation is happening, simply type your question into the chat. And after we get through some of the questions that I already have planned for Valerie, if there are some in the chat, we will get to as many as possible before concluding promptly at 11:30 this morning. After our virtual event concludes, you will be sent the recording of the program along with the survey. So as you all know, our online events are no different than our in-person events. You will receive a survey after we conclude today, and we would love to hear your feedback on today's virtual event. So with all those housekeeping items out of the way, now please allow me to introduce today's speaker, Valerie Camillo. Valerie is the President of Business Operations for the Philadelphia Flyers and the Wells Fargo Center. In this role, she directs all business activities for the NFL franchise and one of the country's busiest arenas. Valerie sets the strategic direction for the team and arena, leading all revenue, marketing, operations, and administrative functions, and is also the first woman hired as president of an NHL franchise. She is also a member of the NHL's Board of Governors, serves as governor and president of the Philadelphia Wings of the National Lacrosse League, and as president of the Maine Marines of the ECHL. Additionally, Valerie is leading the $300 million transformation of the Wells Fargo Center, as I previously mentioned. This is a multi-year redesign of the arena focused on delivering innovative technologies and guest experiences. Valerie received a BS in Commerce from the University of Virginia and an MBA from the Darden School of Business at the University of Virginia. With that, I want to welcome Valerie to the program. And so let's jump into the conversation. Valerie, so thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So this is really exciting, and we're really excited to have you and have you in front of our members. And I jumped into a little bit of your biography while I was introducing you, but I would love to hear, and I think our members would like to hear a little bit more about your story. As I mentioned, you are the first female president of an NHL team. Can you talk a little bit just off the top about your career path that led you to be with our beloved Philadelphia Flyers at the Wells Fargo Center? We would just love to hear a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. And I want to start by saying that New Jersey has a very special place in my heart. My parents, when they were first married, lived in Freehold, where my brother was born. And we spent all of our summer vacations on the Jersey Shore, Wildwood, Point Pleasant, Seaside Heights. And I have a lot of family in South Jersey. So I'm delighted to be here today. Really excited.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so my career journey, I always wanted to work in professional sports from when I was a child, not as a player, but somehow in some capacity in the front office, preferably on the business side. And I began my career working in management consulting. And I spent about 15 years working on strategy consulting, operations consulting, financial and data analytics. And when I was in my mid-30s, I realized that if I wanted to achieve my dream of working in the sports entertainment industry, it was sort of now or never. And so I started to network through my alumni network, through my personal network, and I was able to meet the gentleman who was running at that time the internal consultancy for the NBA in New York. And I was successfully able to get a job there, and that began my journey in the sports industry. I was at the NBA for about 4 years, working in that consultancy. And then I had a desire, as most consultants do, to stop just advising and get into actually leading a P&L, owning a P&L, and operations, directly responsible for operations. And so I then made the jump to lead revenue and marketing for the Washington Nationals Baseball Club. I did that for 5 years and was recruited to the Flyers. I've been now at the Flyers for 2 years, and I'm loving every minute of it.
That's awesome. That's great. And I think the fact that you're the first female president, I know two people, younger women that really strive to break into professional sports. So one loves the NFL, one loves the NBA. So I think that your story is a really inspiring and interesting one for women that really want to get into this professional sports space. So thank you very much for sharing that. I think when I was preparing for this as well, that's very near and dear to my heart, because this organization has been female led for now almost 27 years. And, in business, you don't usually see that all that often. So loved hearing your story, and thank you very much for sharing that with us. So let's move on a little bit and start to talk about some of the more topical issues of the day. I think we're all sick of talking about COVID, but the point is, and at the end of the day, we can't go about ignoring the fact that it certainly has upended all aspects of everyone's personal life and professional lives. And of course, the sports teams have not been excluded from that as well. So let's talk a little bit about the Flyers, but we can talk about sports teams generally, how they've adjusted to focusing on player safety, fan safety. And can you speak to your thoughts on how the NHL and specifically the Flyers handled really the initial task of getting back to playing? Obviously, we know it was a break in the season and then getting back to it, and then what you see on the horizon for the NHL season as we prepare to get back to it, hopefully early next year. So that was a lot, but
yeah, no, it's a lot of problems, a lot of challenges that we're navigating through. So, the pandemic has impacted so many businesses, so many industries, and certainly the live events business was one of those that has been significantly altered. So in addition to sporting events, we host concerts, we host family shows, restaurants at the Wells Fargo Center and in the sports complex, and everything has been by and large shut down since March. We are operating at about 20 to 30% of normal revenue, with certainly the biggest losses in company history, and that's not exclusive to us. That's pretty typical across all of sports, all professional sports. This past season, which ended with the Tampa Bay Lightning winning the Stanley Cup in August, September timeframe, that season was supposed to conclude the prior spring, and the Stanley Cup playoffs would have gone into early summer. But the season was stopped just a few games before the playoffs were to begin. And the NHL was very eager to restart and complete the season. And so were we, because the Flyers were having a really great season, doing quite well. But we quickly realized that with any restart, I think when it first happened, everyone pretty much in America thought like, oh, well, this will be 2 weeks and we'll all get back to normal.
Yep. Guilty.
that wasn't going to be the case. And so the NHL established ultimately bubbles to restart. And a bubble is just an environment that there was no one going in, no one going out. The players were there playing the games, no fans, no one even really from the front office other than the executives and support staff that directly deal with the team. And we were able to successfully complete the playoffs, award the Stanley Cup in a very non-traditional way. And so we were hopeful looking to this coming season, which normally would start in October, but because everything had slid, was targeting an early January start and still is. And we were hopeful, last summer that perhaps by January we would be in a place where we could contemplate having events back at the Wells Fargo Center and some number of fans back at the Wells Fargo Center. And it's looking now that for the January start with the rising cases, and everything that everyone can see in the news, that that may be optimistic, at least for the beginning of the season. So now we're hopeful that, as the vaccine comes online, we're able to welcome guests back as we move through the season, which will run, let's call it January through spring and early summer again. But this is something certainly that every time we make a prediction of, well, we think it's going to be this long, and then it's surprised us, and not been, unfortunately, a good surprise.
Yeah. And, I thought it was really remarkable, not just hockey, but across the board. It's really strange watching these sporting events with no fans in the audience, and, the NFL or the NBA with the cutouts. And I'm like, that's weird, I think. I don't know. I think everyone has a different opinion on it, but we did an event, a virtual event with Beasley Reese not too long ago. And I asked him this question. I mean, sports and the fans and the energy that the fans provide, it really helps some teams, in all sporting events. Just out of your curiosity, you're someone who is right there on the ground. Do you think that hurt the Flyers or helped the Flyers, or did you see that lack of energy being impactful to hockey teams across the board without having the fans in the stand?
I think it's very different for all players across all professional sports. And if you think about Philadelphia, Philadelphia fans give a very distinct home ice advantage across sports. Philadelphia is not a place that visiting teams want to come and want to play, because we have really engaged, awesome fans who bring the energy, who bring the excitement, who make those visiting teams, feel that this isn't a walk in the park to come skate on the ice at the Wells Fargo Center. And I think that does carry over to the players on the ice, to the Flyers. And so, yes, I'm sure that without a doubt, it's a different experience for the players. They've expressed that. But I think we've recognized that, the show must go on, and we're putting on the show. It's televised, and the NHL has done a number of great things to make the experience for the viewer as realistic as possible, including crowd noise and some other things.
Sure.
So I think the broadcast and the events are really high quality on television, but to be in the arena and for the players, there's absolutely a difference than having 20,000 plus screaming Philadelphians behind you, cheering you on.
Yeah, sure. Listen, I'm a huge Philadelphia sports fan. I'll tell you that there's nothing like the real thing when it comes to the booze. Yeah. The piped in booze, or just don't do it for us, like the way the real in-person booze the Philadelphia fans usually have no shame in throwing out there. But no, it's really interesting to see how teams have adapted to that. And I tend to, agree with you with absolutely no expertise in this area. I think our fan base here in Philadelphia, for better or for worse, and I think we get a bad rap, is absolutely, something that ends up being, a net positive for our sports teams, because, we are very true blue fans here in Philadelphia, as you know.
No question. And I was thinking, the other day I was walking the arena. It's totally empty. It's almost a surreal experience to walk through it. It's usually hosting, almost 300 nights a year. There's an event going on at the Wells Fargo Center in a typical year, and the lights are relatively off. The concession stands are wrapped up, and it's just like motionless and waiting in time. And here's an arena where we've put hundreds of millions of dollars and countless man hours into redesigning and transforming, and no one is able to come in and enjoy it. And it's just sad, really. It really is. But then I remember how blessed we are. We have a healthy workforce. We're part of the Comcast Corporation, which has afforded us great benefit in a time like this. It's a Fortune 30 company, and they've treated our employees with care and respect throughout. We were able to, for our part-time workforce, pay them on all the scheduled events that we had for the spring and summer as if those events happened. And we have kept on our full-time front office workforce through today. And so that's not common. That's not typical in pro sports right now. And that's a benefit of being part of a great company like Comcast. And so there's much to be grateful for. And as I was walking through, I did by the end of my walk think about that and realize we'll open again and we'll welcome people back, and it'll be a really joyous occasion when we do.
Yep, absolutely. And, we are so fortunate. You're right. I mean, Comcast has been such a loyal partner for our organization for over 25 years. The Flyers have been a loyal partner of our chamber for, I think, close to 30 years, 25, 30 years or so. But you're right, that's not what you're traditionally seeing right now in other professional sports. So kudos to Comcast and the entire organization there, because it certainly has been challenging times. So let's it was a nice segue into talking a little bit about what's going on at the Wells Fargo Center and the renovations and the upgrades that have been happening there, because correct me if I'm wrong, Valerie, but they started pre-COVID. They were already going on when COVID hit, and then COVID hits. And so
Yep.
do you talking a little bit about, where you were, how COVID impacted it, and where you're still looking to go and how that process is going?
So the transformation of the Wells Fargo Center was about 2/3 complete when the pandemic began. This summer was going to be a major step towards final completion. And the Wells Fargo Center, let me just talk a little bit about why we decided to transform the arena. It was built in 1996, and a few years ago, we had reached the decision point: do we build something new, a brand new arena, or do we transform what we have? And we decided that the arena had great bones, and also that we had a strong commitment to the South Philly sports complex, which is really unique in all the world, and that all the teams and all the buildings are there in one space with ample parking, ample access, all the rest. So we made the decision to decide to invest. And we also at that time made the decision that we weren't going to skimp on that investment. And so Comcast, in conjunction with Comcast Spectacor, which is the part of the company that runs the Flyers in the Wells Fargo Center that I support, we put together a plan for a $300 million overhaul of every fan-facing area in the arena, as well as our HVAC system, our sort of the guts and the underpinning of how the arena works.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were focused on not just bringing in fresh, new, clean elements and environments, what you normally think of in a redesign of a building, but also new experiences. And we've seen a trend in pretty much every industry towards customization. It's not a one size fits all product or service for every customer. And we applied those principles to the redesign of the Wells Fargo Center. So we looked at the different customer segments that we have, and we said, how do we create something that is attractive and addresses the needs of each of them, to create an experience that when they come down as a guest to one of our events, it's a memory that is positive, joyful, and they want to have again. And so we designed spaces that were targeted for young singles, for corporate hospitality, for families with children, even children with special needs. We have dedicated spaces for, and then of course for our avid fans. And so we've gotten tremendous feedback on the elements of the transformation that are complete, and we are excited to pick up the project again when the pandemic subsides and we can get back in there and do what we do best.
That's great. And it's so funny because you mentioned previously that you had something there every day.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID. And so often you think of Sixers, Flyers, some may think the Wings, concerts, of course. What other type of events are you doing there in a pre-COVID world, and how are these? So you mentioned areas for families with children with disabilities, or so you're looking for that customization. But I think that people are just so used to thinking of the Wells Fargo Center purely as a concert and sports arena, and there is so much more to it, and therefore so much more that must go into the planning of the renovations. And it sounds like that's what you're saying. The customization is very high as you continue to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And concerts, sporting events, they're our bread and butter, but we also host family touring shows like Disney on Ice and the Harlem Globetrotters. We're a place too for the intersection of culture in the region. We were home to the 2016 Democratic National Convention, which the transformation really kicked off to be able to meet some of the needs of that event. and we're home to many NCAA championship matches.
Yeah.
We recently were awarded the upcoming wrestling championships in a couple years, as well as rounds of the NCAA basketball tournament, which of course we know everyone loves. They're such exciting events. So all of these events are very important to the success and health of our business. And when our gates are able to reopen, we anticipate to continue to have a wonderful full slate of offerings for the public.
Yeah. And I read somewhere in preparation for this that the Wells Fargo Center is in the top like 3 busiest arenas in the country. Is that right? Or is that not right?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Okay.
4th busiest arena, I believe,
Fourth
in the United
busiest?
States, 7th in the world, which
Jeez.
when I came to join the Wells Fargo Center, I didn't know that stat. It's incredibly impressive, but we have a wonderfully vibrant region, and we have a community that likes to come together and experience live sports and entertainment. So it's a great blessing to work at such a popular venue.
Yep. Well, kudos to you for all you're doing and continue to do as the renovations continue. I love the Wells Fargo Center. I go there often for sporting events and concerts. So I look forward to seeing it when it's all done. And hopefully COVID won't slow that down too much longer. But let's move on again. You know, you talked about community just a second ago, and you know the Flyers are well known. You know, really all of our Philadelphia sports teams are really well known to be a community partner here in the Philadelphia, you know, regional area. As the first wave of the pandemic hit, I was contacted by the Flyers, who had announced, well, it was shortly after after we were kind of in it with the pandemic, that they were launching the Hometown Assistance Program. And I believe it was $500,000 to a few small businesses to really help on the marketing side of the equation, marketing and advertising, to help them try to, you know, continue their promotions through the pandemic. That program, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, is closed now. But can you talk a little bit about what went into the decision to create that program, and maybe anything else the Flyers have coming up in that charitable community outreach space that we can look forward to?
Yeah, so in the early days of the pandemic, we knew that this was going to create a challenge for the community, unlike really anything we've seen in our lifetime, perhaps. And we put together a community impact team to really look across our portfolio of things available to us to see how we could help. The first thing that we did in the very early days was to leverage our Flyers charities, our foundation, to make a $250,000 donation to Phil Abundance in support of food insecurity. Yeah. Flyers Charities is a wonderful organization, 501c3, has given out over $30 million in grants and awards over the course of its existence. And they stepped up and worked with us to help identify where we want to step in and immediately have impact. Mm-hmm. After that, because it was a monetary donation, some of our employees started to reach out, and this was back in, let's call it April, and say that they wanted to volunteer. And we considered opportunities for that, but at that time it just wasn't practical. You know, the country was in the city and the region was in a phase of lockdown, and you know, we wanted to come up with something that would allow them to contribute and volunteer, but do so safely. And so we set up something called our Phone Line Mates program. And this was in recognition that at that time, if you were a senior living in a senior center, you were confined to your room. You think about that for these elderly folks in our community. And so we set up a program, and we started with the Abramson Senior Center, where our employees would set up weekly calls with a buddy, right? Like almost like the old pen pal model, but done over the phone, and would just call for connection to help with loneliness. And we got some of our most senior executives to participate. I participated. Our coach, Elaine Vigneault, had a line mate. And so that was just a great way to volunteer safely and effectively, throughout the summer. And then from there, as businesses started to reopen, the idea of Flyers Hometown Assist came to mind, which is, what do we have that we can do to promote these businesses and drive business back to them? we had a very engaged group of fans when the NHL season, our playoffs restarted, and we knew we'd have, the eyeballs and the attention. And so we wanted to work with a few small businesses in the region to help put a spotlight on them and hopefully drive business to them, because that's what they really need for their vibrancy and continuing survival. And while we had our initial 5 awardees, including 3 Black-owned businesses, we also are going to run that program again. So while it's closed, please, we'll probably reach out to you again, and you can talk to members of your chamber about whether or not it's a fit for their needs. But
absolutely,
we've stayed engaged throughout this crisis, and we anticipate that there's a lot more to come, because again, we'll have that attention from the public when we restart our games, hopefully in January. And we're thinking now about how to be creative to draw those people towards having a positive impact.
That's fantastic. And I know that, obviously we're a chamber of commerce. We have businesses of all shapes and sizes, all industries, sole proprietors up to, major Fortune 500 companies in our chamber. But when we were able to promote the Hometown Assist program, at that time that it came out, our members were, and they remain this way, candidly, so desperate for any assistance. It was very well received. I'm sure we had some of our members apply. And so it's great to hear that you are going to be looking to do another round of that. And I look forward to any members that are tuning in. Once I get it, you will know about it as well. So stay tuned on that. One other partnership that I always like to plug our members, that when I have members on, I like to plug our other members, that we are fortunate to have Penn Medicine in our membership here at the chamber. And the Flyers, entered into an agreement with Penn Medicine I think it was right pre-COVID, if my numbers and dates are right, that Penn Medicine would be, its official health system. And I thought there were some community health program type events that were being planned. Is this something that is still on the table? Is this something you've been doing things with Penn Medicine with? Is this something that people in the community can look forward to?
Absolutely. A lot of those community events are things that we couldn't execute right now, given the pandemic protocols, but we anticipate, just as when our arena reopens and normalcy returns, that those things will spring back to life. And we've had to pivot with Penn Medicine, as we've had to with so many of our partners and so many of the things that we've done. They're our official team medical provider. So they provide care to our players, in a lot of different ways. And then, what a great, if you have a really bad thing happen, like a pandemic, what a great blessing to have a partner like Penn Medicine that you can reach out to for advisory, which I did personally. We were trying to navigate at the very early days when there was so much information coming in, and we were still open, and then there was some positive cases related to a Sixers game that you all may remember back in March. To be able to pick up the phone and talk with some of the top doctors in the world in the space of infectious disease for their advice and for their counsel. And here we are. It's interesting. I just looked at these notes the other day, because we're working on our reopening plan, which I can talk to you a little bit about. But I look back at these notes from the first days in March, after we certainly in the industry realized what we had on our hands. And the advice that those doctors gave me are, after everything that came through, the same advice that we're getting today from, the top advisory in the world. So what great confidence and reward it was to have a partner like Penn Medicine alongside, as we navigated these difficult decisions that we've had to make related to our players' care, related to the safety of operating our arena.
Absolutely. And Penn Medicine certainly is a great partner, not just for the Flyers, but in so many community organizations like ours and in so many others in the region. So thank you for that. So you mentioned the reopening plan. Let's talk a little bit about it. I know a question had come through the chat to someone that's a season ticket holder, let's talk kind of globally about the reopening plan. And then, when you do get back to a point of letting fans in the stadium, how is that going to be navigated? Or are there thoughts already around that? And can you detail them?
Yeah, unfortunately, it looks like this pandemic isn't done with us yet. I mean, we see rising case counts. We see cities and states enacting new protocols, new guidelines. But we have spent the past 6 months plus building out an industry-leading plan to reopen safely, and we've named it Back to Broad. And it's a comprehensive plan that focuses on third-party certification, investments in contactless experiences, everything from what you have to touch when you're within the arena, from your parking experience to your ticketing experience to our concessions to our restrooms. And then we've also invested in $11 million in HVAC technologies, the best and most modern, and that will assist with air filtration and other benefits. And then finally, we've established comprehensive disinfectant protocols and launched a clean team, both in event and after event, to focus on keeping the environment clean. So we are well positioned when the city and state tells us that it is permissible to have guests back, to do so safely, and we're quite confident in our plan, which we'll share more details about as we get closer to being able to welcome guests back. And then, of course, like everyone else, we're eager and excited for the vaccine solutions. We heard more good news today in the media about the degree to which the vaccines are effective and the likelihood for distribution as we go through the year. So we're hopeful that we're going to have guests back at the Wells Fargo Center, through great planning, through vaccines and other these things. The pandemic tends to come in waves, and the city and the states reevaluate as the measures work, and we come to another phase in what we're dealing with. But I remain hopeful for the future of Wells Fargo Center, certainly the Flyers. We have this one thing the pandemic has taught me, and it's taught it to me personally and through everyone that I've interacted with who knows what I do and sort of longs to come back to these events, is that there is something about gathering together as a community to celebrate something, to root for something, to experience something, be sport in concert, that when this ends, I've been asked the question, do you think fans will be eager to come back? And my answer is a resounding yes, because that need is in all of us. And when it's safe to do so, I believe our guests will come roaring back. There was I've read a lot about, I think many of us know too much now about the Spanish flu in 1918. But one of the things that I had read about that was that the Spanish flu led into the Roaring '20s. And, I think that when we're through this, there's going to be such pent up demand and desire to come together as a community that sports and live entertainment is going to come roaring back.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. And, it's so hard, whether you're the smallest of the small organization or the biggest of the big, planning these reopening plans are so hard, because it is very much, as you rightly said, a moving target. I raised my hand jokingly early on. I was one of those people in March that, thought by June, everything was going to be back.
Right.
My chamber was going to be back and having events, and everything was going to be back to normal. And to think back on that and how much obviously we've learned since that point. So these reopening plans are complicated, and they're very much a living document, and that I'm sure the Flyers, just like so many other regular companies out there, are just kind of rolling with the punches and making decisions somewhat as they go, and always trying to be as responsible as possible. It sounds like that's exactly what the Flyers are doing in this instance as well. So let's jump into some of the questions that have come through the chat. We've gotten a few. Let's see here, Valerie. We have a few questions, and this is so common in the chamber. People, businesses obviously, are forced into shutdown situations. People are seeing different financial impacts, and you alluded to really all professional sports, feeling the pain as well. One of the questions that came through is, have you assessed the financial impact of the pandemic on your operations? And what steps have you taken to bring in certain efficiencies, certain savings to the enterprise to try to help offset? And this is something very top of mind for all of my members. So I'd be curious to hear what the Flyers are doing in that space.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's every business is dealing with that. I feel my job has pivoted from planning and executing events and driving revenue for those events to scenario planning and forecasting, and then doing it all over again when the scenario changes. But my consulting background, thank God, I used to do that for a living. So that's not that far afield for me. But yeah, I mean, we certainly, as I mentioned, we didn't take steps on the labor side. And that was a purposeful decision in partnership with Comcast. But we did, however, need to take a close look at the P&L and make reductions in other places. So we've had to draw down our operating expenses. The directs obviously fall by themselves, but the indirects we've had to make, basically we've hibernated many of the parts of our business until we have more clarity on how this will evolve and when we will come back to play. We also have paused our capital plan, though the transformation that we talked about, this was supposed to be this past summer was supposed to be almost the final completion of it. And we delayed that to save cash and be able to navigate through successfully. But I think there's no business that hasn't had to go through every single expense line item and determine, is this a contract we can renegotiate? Is this something that we can pause? Is this something that we can cut? And it's been a very laborious process on our finance department, our CFO in particular, not standard, run-of-the-mill operations by any stretch of the imagination.
Yep. And you're right. I mean, we're all, kind of going through this, like I said, from the smallest of the smallest to the biggest of the big. It's assessing, what you can hit the pause button on. And of course you have less expenses because of all this shutdown, but in the same breath, you still have things that you need to get done. And so balancing that is something that I think everyone really relates to and is struggling with. So thank you for that, Valerie. Another question came through, and you obviously alluded to this when you were talking about how instrumental Comcast has been in helping support the organization, the Wells Fargo Center and Flyers. But a question came through, and again, this is another thing that's top of mind for our members as it relates to how you're going about supporting your employees during the pandemic. Because as you know, every organization, your employees, it's just such a hard time for everyone.
Yes.
You're a large employer, so can you speak to some of the things that you've done to really help ease the pain of this pandemic for your employees, other than, of course, what you already mentioned with the workforce?
Yeah. So I think that, we thought about having a people strategy specific to Comcast Spectacor as we dealt with this crisis, because it has impacted our piece of Comcast probably as dramatically as any other part of Comcast, if not more so. I mean, certainly Universal Parks is another part of Comcast that has been greatly impacted by the pandemic. But for us, we developed a local employee care plan, and there were several pieces of it. The first piece was a recognition that we had to communicate frequently, because there was so much nervousness at the beginning around, seeing these other teams in other markets go through layoffs, go through furloughs. There's just great fear around what was coming. We wanted to stay in good dialogue, and then also just let them know as this was evolving, how we were thinking about, would our season be restarted? Would it be completed? So we upped communication, direct communication through town halls and through other, all virtual, of course, through other means. But we did some fun communications too. We launched an employee newsletter that focused on just keeping employees up to date on what was going on. Our communications team does a great job with it. It's very visual. There's videos, there's photos and the like. And then in the summer, I was co-hosting a podcast with our Andrea Helfrich, who does our in-game entertainment on the scoreboard. She's our host, our in-game host. Yeah. So I was kind of the sidekick, up to her lead on the show, and we would interview employees, and it was very lighthearted. It wasn't about the pandemic. It was just about, getting to know people you work with. And we got great feedback on that. It was called Stay the Bleep at Home, which was kind of funny because that's encouraging people to put down. So we've done a lot around communication, but then in our decision-making, we've tried to stick to our core values. I'm sure most of the members of your chamber have some statements of value for their corporation, of who they want to be, how they want to treat their employees. And so as I sat down with our HR department, with our finance department, and we were making difficult decisions on cuts and how we would interact with our employees during this time, you know, we kept going back to this list as like, does this show care for the community, you know, which led to the launch of our community impact team? Does this show that this is a best place to work, which is one of our stated values? You know, does this treat our employees as a family? And, you know, I think sticking to our core values really helped with our decision making. And I think when we come out of this, it's going to, you know, the core values are rather newly launched, that people will realize they're more than just things we put on the wall, because we kept referencing back to them with the decisions that we were making. So that's somehow how we navigated through.
Yeah, and that's a really important point too. I know at our organization too, we launched a new mission, vision, and 6 brand new core values, the first ever in the history of our chamber in January. And when the pandemic hit, we thought we have to stay true to this, even in this completely, you know, unprecedented, unique time. So how do we continue to, you know, tell our membership that this is truly who we're about in now, you know, a virtual space? And I think that having those core values and your mission statement as your driving direction is I know it's been instrumental to us as an organization as well. It's interesting to hear that an organization like yours also did something similarly. So everyone, I do believe that we may have just lost Valerie's video. So if you could just pause 1 second, we are going to take a quick break and see if we can get Valerie back. Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience, everyone. We are working to get Valerie back. If you can just hang tight another minute or two, we will be back shortly. Thank you so much. Valerie.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that.
No problem at all. No problem at all. So let's kind of roll on to the next question that we have here. And this is, I think, a really interesting one. The question that came through was, do you see any changes that you are making now as a result of the pandemic that you would like to see stick after? They like to look at the pandemic as if it's been, and it has been terrible, but, we're learning new lessons and we're all evolving organizationally and professionally as a result. Is there anything that you think is coming out of this as maybe a net positive that you would like to see adopted down the road after we're through all this craziness?
I think absolutely. So one of the things that we've had to do is make a lot of investments. I mentioned we have our Back to Broad plan, and a good deal of it is investing in PPE and investing in plexiglass and things within the building to help provide barriers and protection. But then a lot of what we've invested in has also been to enable a contactless experience. And so we now have the next generation of a digital experience at our parking gates. We used to just have the old-fashioned drive up. Here's the money for the parking. Go in, tear the ticket. It's all been transformed. That when guests come back, it'll be a digital experience. With our ticketing coming in, same with our ability to purchase, guests' ability to purchase concessions. You'll be able to do it from your phone, which we never had before. The pickup experience you can enable through an app. So every facet, every touch point of the fan experience now, in order to make it contactless, has had this other benefit of also making it sort of next gen. And I think that there's a lot of benefit that will come to that in terms of being able to push different offers to guests while they're in the building, to understand. You mentioned you have some season plan holders in the group, to understand their behaviors and preferences so we can better target to them. Again, our goal is not a one size fits all experience, but a customized experience. And I think those elements will remain for the long term.
Yep. And that's definitely one side of the equation. And the other side too, when you were talking previously about how internally your communications team created a newsletter on the internal side of the equation too, I have found that, these little things, are kind of bringing employees together a little bit more as a family in some ways. Things like a newsletter, things like, fun things, we joke about it, but, I would never be able to see into your house. Not that, I need to see into your house, but it's a more personalized experience that we're having, connecting with people that we work with as a result of this pandemic. I think that's something that's interesting that's come out of that too. I don't know if that's anything that you are feeling amongst the team there as well.
Well, we would have never put our players or our alumni in a virtual meeting with our fans prior. We would have thought to do it prior to the pandemic, but we were forced to do it because we had to engage and we had to stay connected. And I think those will remain as well, because it just opens up new opportunities. And we have a gritty 5K, which is a costume fun, a fun run for charity, for Flyers charities. And it's always, it's a relatively new event, but it's always been just, you come down, traditional 5K, you run it, we're in the area near the Wells Fargo Center. There's a post-run party. But this year we couldn't do any of that. So it became a full virtual event. We got people signing up from all 50 states and internationally. And so as we go forward, yes, we'll have the run again back at the Wells Fargo Center, but why would we not continue to host the virtual run when we had, fans from around the country that wanted to participate and wanted to donate to the charity?
Sure. That's right. And that's a perfect example of some of these strange upsides we're seeing about how you've been forced to think creatively, and now you're seeing a whole new universe out there that you never would have contemplated before. So thank you for that. Well, Valerie, I have one more question. It's not in your space because you're not, a person that is picking players and following, how the practices are going necessarily, but we obviously have a lot of interested Flyers fans on tuning in right now. So can you just give us your thoughts? And I think that we'll probably end on this note on, assuming we're in that first week of January, and let's assume the season goes off, as it's currently planned to. How do you think the Flyers are going to be? Do you have any predictions you can give our audience?
Well, my crystal ball sees a Stanley Cup, but it sees one every year. Look, this is an exciting team, and which is one of the reasons when we were going into the playoffs and everything got paused in the spring. This was an exciting team that was really hot and destined to do great things. I mean, there's bigger problems in the world that came from the shutdown, the Flyers season, the Flyers mojo getting sort of paused. But I think this is a team that is young, is exciting. We have one of the, if not the best young goalies in the National Hockey League, which is really the key ingredient. I'm not fully convinced we're done with all of our moves to come. And I think that our fans are going to be delighted to see the growth of this team. The Flyers are back in the playoffs, and we intend to stay there for years and years to come.
Well, that is a fun and optimistic note that we are going to close out today's program on, Valerie, if that's okay with you. So before we wrap up, any final thoughts or comments you would like to give for our audience?
No, I just thank you for having me. Thank you to South Jersey for being such great fans of the Philadelphia Flyers and for all the events that we have at the Wells Fargo Center. You're a big part of our customer base, and we greatly appreciate you. We miss you, and we can't wait to welcome you back. And when we do, we're going to do so safely. So let's all hang in there together, and on to tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Valerie. You've been fantastic to get to know you during this last hour and for our members to get to know you. So thank you so much for joining us. And again, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a very special thank you to our friends at Wells Fargo that did make this program possible today. John Zimmerman, who's the regional bank president, and his entire team. Thank you very much for your loyal support during this very crazy year that we've been through. So to everyone who tuned in today, just a quick reminder that you will be sent a survey. We do ask you to fill it out. Let us know what you thought of today's event. And also, if you had to tune in late or maybe missed a portion of it, you will be getting the entire recording on demand as well, so you can watch back whatever you missed. Again, thank you, Valerie, so much for being with us. To our members,
thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. And everyone have a great rest of your day and great rest of your week. We'll see you online again soon.